Hi, thanks everyone for being here, to the organizer for the invite, and I'm very much looking forward to the discussion on Tuesday. I will start sharing my screen now. So my presentation is on digitalization and the rebound effect. And just to give the context and at the same time, the overarching goal of my research, which is to contribute to the understanding of this really complex relation between the ongoing digitalization and society-wide energy consumption, of course, in the context of the climate crisis that has become so evident over the last weeks. And this is a bit of a busy picture by Johan Röckström from the Stockholm Resilience Institute. It has been also taken over in IPCC reports. The essence of this picture is this line here, which is how we as humankind need to develop our, or to reduce rather our greenhouse gas emissions, which is to halve them every decade, starting yesterday, starting in 2020, so that by 2050, 2060, we are basically emission-free. And in this context, digitalization is this large blanket technology that protrudes more and more aspects of our everyday lives, of our societies and economies. So the question is, what is its impact and how can it maybe be steered? And it is a complex relation, and it has, at least there are many ways of categorizing this, of taxonomies, but perhaps the simplest and very good for our purposes today is to look at three main parts. One is this small devil here, which is the direct energy consumption of ICT. Then it is the savings it can induce in other domains. So while these were direct effects, these are indirect effects and indirect positive effects because it can induce savings. And then also, unfortunately, it can also induce more consumption, so indirect negative effects. And as it happens, these very, and by the way, these are very closely and tightly interconnected. So it's this fractal picture where the angels and the demons are undistinguishable and they are very close together. You probably know this picture by Martin Escher called Heaven and Hell. And it is a bit the same as I will show over my talk with digitalization. But let me start with the first part, the first small level, the direct footprint. This was, over the last years, an intensely debated topic in our societies and in media in particular, in quality newspapers such as The Guardian, Wired, and also this is the largest Swiss newspaper, saying that, you know, it will be video streaming in particular would consume a fifth of global electricity, that is making the planet warmer, that streaming is the new flying, and so on. And this is not our topic today, but let me just say that these are vastly overstated claims. And if you're interested, we can discuss on Tuesday why. The current estimates go a bit apart, but I think that the most reliable ones put the entire digitalization today at around 6% of worldwide electricity, which is about 1% of worldwide energy and 1.5% of worldwide greenhouse gases. And this is indeed growing, not only absolutely, but even relatively. But still, it's not growing so fast that it will be one of the main reasons for concern. It not digital technologies will kill the planet, at least not with their direct impact. So again, this is not our topic now. But then we have, on the other hand, the energy savings induced by digital technologies. This is often referred to as enablement, that the digital technologies enable savings. And here we had, over the past 10 to 15 years, various numbers being put forward by the industry. Above all, here is an example of British Telecom saying that its technologies help its customers help, like not as a potential, but that they helped already save 3 times as many emissions as those services and the entire operation of British Telecom produces. But also organizations, EU, OECD, and even the World Wildlife Fund have put forward such numbers, such as a billion, so a gigaton of CO2 reduction. And perhaps the best known are the famous or infamous series of JESSI studies. JESSI is a telecom and IT lobby group. It stands for Global E-Sustainability Initiative, and they brought out their first study in 2008. And there they predicted that by 2020, digital technologies will avoid 7.8 gigatons of emissions, which is of course a lot, right? We have as humankind around 50 today. So that's like 16% or something, a huge amount. So this was a 2008 study. Then in 2012, 4 years later, they came up with the new study. It's not so clear here, that's why I'm enhancing it a bit, but it's 9.1 gigatons. And in 2015, we are already at 12.1 gigatons. So I plotted here these 3 studies and then a 4th one that came 2019, and that is much more humble in its claims. They were all done with different consultancies. And crucially, none of what had been predicted, the first 2 studies predicted by 2020, right? The 3rd one by 2030. And so the first one could have already been validated, but never has anything been validated, nor in fact has digitalization contributed close to what had been predicted in those old studies. So as with the footprint before, but now to the other side, these are vast overstatements, and they are also not our topic today, but they will be implicitly part of our topic while showing why, how these overstatements came to be. And one of the main problem of their method, they have several methodological issues, but one of the main ones is that they ignored the rebound effect, which is indeed our topic today. And just to make sure we're on the same page, this is not to say that there are no indirect positive effects. So this enablement, it very much exists. There are, and we'll see actually quite a couple of examples later, but their assessment has often been flawed. And one of these flaws, again, is ignoring, the other side of the medal, which is the indirect negative effects. So coming to the actual topic of my presentation, the rebound of digitalization. And for this, I want to start by shortly explaining rebound effects here using a picture by Tilman Santarius from Berlin. Let's say that we have, or a company produces a product, and this square, there is so much input needed to create 1 unit of the product. This can be any input resource, it can be energy in particular, any other resource, it could be time, let's say energy for simplicity, right? So this is the baseline. With that much available input, the company can create 6 units of this product. And then all of a sudden we have an efficiency increase. So to create 1 unit, you no longer need this amount, but the smaller amount. And this means down here that you can produce your 6 products more efficiently, and you have something of the input left, right? So this would be efficiency gain. Wow, great. The problem is, though, that this also makes the product cheaper. And these economic mechanisms that we know since Adam Smith, since the 18th century, of course, when a product becomes cheaper, in general, the demand for it increases. So there will be also more production to meet that demand, right? And thus, this additional production here of more units than before is the rebound effect. Of course, it would not need to be exactly as much as had been saved. It could be less, but in particular, it could also be more, right? And in all cases, it's a rebound effect of below 100%, of exactly 100% if it's like this, or it's called backfire if it's larger than 100%, right? And this is the simplest form, direct rebound effect. So we have more production of the very product that became cheaper in the first place. And again, if it's larger than 100%, economists talk about the backfire. And this is the direct rebound effect. There are, however, also others, and we have it here in this figure by Steve Sorrell as well. So we have a more fuel-efficient car because we either made an engine change or changed the car entirely. And this is first good. We have less energy. Wow, efficiency gains. But due to the rebound effects, we might drive further or more often, and thus consume more energy after all. So this is direct rebound. But we might also do something entirely different with the money we saved. And this other activity might be quite energy or resource intensive as well. And that this is an indirect rebound effect. And there are several forms of rebound effects. There is not one taxonomy. People, categorize them in different ways. Some talk about induced effects as a part of rebound effects or as a partly different effect. I think this is more of an academic distinction that is not so relevant for us now. But we have substitution effects, induction effects, time rebound, skill rebound, and so on. So many types of rebound effects. And how is this relevant to digitalization? Digitalization, I think, is very prone to have strong rebound effects. And the classic example are autonomous vehicles, which I think we can all agree it's not automotive technology. It is very much information and communication technology, right? It's machine learning and input from cameras and perhaps other sensors. So it's pure digitalization. So why am I using public transportation today? First, because I'm a chronic procrastinator. So if I have a meeting in Bern, the capital of Switzerland, and I live in Zurich, there is a 1 hour train ride. I need that 1 hour to finish, to wrap up my presentation. I'm not as smug as this gentleman here, but nevertheless, I use the hour in the train. Then when I arrive in Bern, there is no way I can find a parking lot, as in most, large European cities. And on the way back, why should I drive when I can, enjoy my time, either work on the presentation for tomorrow, although this would contradict a bit my procrastinator, I need to do it really on the last moment. But I could read a book, or talk with colleagues, have even a glass of wine with them. And as you might have noticed, in a world of autonomous driving, all these reasons for public transportation no longer exist. I can, of course, finish my presentation in the car while the car takes me to Bern, right? I don't need to find a parking lot there because I can just send the car back to Zurich and to call it in the evening to pick me up. Or if it's a shorter meeting, 2 hours, it can just circle around the block for 2 hours by itself, right? And you see already the consumption there. And on the way back, the same, I can use the time as I please because the car drives. So there is no reason, no serious reason, other than perhaps costs for me to subject myself to the inconveniences of public transportation, to the noises, the smells, the viruses relevant today, right? When I can have all the advantages of the former advantages of public transportation in an autonomous vehicle, right? So while in the beginning there has been some optimism about self-driving cars, it is more and more clear that they will induce more energy consumption and that they will substitute to some extent public transportation. And this was an example of convenience example. But more than this, there are categories that today cannot drive, and they can drive or being driven by autonomous vehicles, of course, elderly and people with impairments. And by the way, this is something that we probably want as a society, right? We want people to be able to lead more independent lives. So that's also, you might see here, a bit of a conflict between the environmental dimension and the societal dimension of sustainability. And in my research, I see more and more actually of these conflicts, and I think they would need to be researched much more profoundly than they are today. But it's not a topic now. But also kids can drive to school, right? Or being driven by the car, and you can make this as ridiculous as you want. Pets can drive to the vet or to the park, have their run out, and objects can drive as well. So these are all, this is all induced consumption. Again, I'm not making here a distinction between rebound and the rebound effect and induced effect. And I think these are typical and crucial for digital systems. And this is a very clear example, I think, autonomous vehicles, but there are, of course, many others. For example, online shopping. This is the Digitech is the store that I usually buy my electronics and stuff I need from Switzerland, but they also have this daily offer. So whenever I log in there, I see, hey, today the daily offer is this printer. And I might not actually need a printer, but because I'm seeing it there, I might be tempted. I have been tempted, and I did it in the past. I bought stuff that I didn't really need it, or not urgently at least. So it's this, and not only this, it's the easiness, the fact that I can compare prices, that I can read reviews, that I can so easily, buy just by a few clicks, and even buy a flight or something, where before I need to go to the office. So all this lowers what economists call transaction costs, which are monetary or non-monetary energy, time costs that I invest to find a good. And now with digital technologies, it's very easy to find the goods. Or, by the way, to order, when you order clothes or shoes, to order them, in 12 combinations of colors and sizes, and then send 11 back with the van. So yeah, I might not drive to the store or take public transportation to the store, but a van will come twice to my home, and so clear rebound effect here. On the other hand, the sharing economy, which is more or less shared, but like ride sharing, such as Uber, Lyft, and so on, accommodation sharing, Airbnb, Booking.com, and all the others, that make both the service itself, accommodation, cheaper, and again lower the transaction costs. I can find it much more easily. I can read reviews. I see pictures. Okay, I'm booking it, and this spurs also my flight to that place. Or telework, which we all grew accustomed to, and that has its advantages, obviously. And yes, this might indeed, save some trips to work, but then those trips often are multi-purpose. On the way to the work or on the way back, I can take the kids to school or pick them up, or do my groceries, do sports, and so on. And if I'm not doing the work trips anymore, I might do those others as well. And even I might actually consider moving out of the city, moving further away. If now, after the pandemics, we'll all get used and to commute only 2 days per week to the office, and all the rest will be home office, then I might consider to move further away, because for 2 days I can make a longer commute. And then this means that I saved 3 out of 5 trips, but there is a strong rebound because those 2 remaining are much longer. So digital technologies have lots of rebound, and lots of them, and I could continue a lot with other examples. The question is then, is this all a sad story? Are we doomed due to rebound? Is any efficiency measure going to disappear? Unfortunately not. There are applications with little or no rebound effect. I start with one that is outside digitalization. All my life, since I was born, I had vacuum cleaners that would need between 1.5 and 2 kilowatts of power. Since 2017, I have a Dyson that needs only like 20 to 25% of that, right? And because vacuum cleaning is not my favorite activity in the world, I'm not vacuuming more. So just because it's more energy efficient, doesn't necessarily induce a rebound, because there is no more demand for it. I have no more demand for vacuum cleaning. So when there is something like natural limits on demand, right? And this can be seen in digitalization. Google and the Environmental Defense Fund in the US, EDF, made a project where they outfitted the Google Street View cars with methane sensors in their front bumpers. And they would use this to find gas leaks in natural gas distribution networks in the US. And they would categorize them in the yellow ones, which are like low flow leaks, orange, which are medium flow, and the red one, which are the really high flow. And while they would just pick this up, there's of course an algorithm behind it, obviously, and they would just pick this up while they drive around the streets. And this is, and here what I want to say is that then if the utility company knows where those leaks are and goes and, you know, they have a plan to replace pipes every couple of decades, every 20, 30 years anyway, but then they can prioritize those streets where you have the large leaks, and then you save methane. But you don't save a lot of, and methane is of course a very potent greenhouse gas, but you don't save a lot of money. So you do not have the economic, mechanism for a rebound effect. Okay, then I had another example. I will just quickly ask a question here. So these are again outside digitalization, and these are Japanese vending machines. And I have a question to you. So this up here is the per vending machine energy consumption that fell abruptly here from, you know, almost 6,000 kilowatt hours to half of it, right? And this is the total number of machines, and we have barely a rebound effect. Why do you think this is the case? Okay. So, and don't cheat. I had the subtitles there. Don't make stop and look at it, please. Then I have two last examples that I want to discuss a bit longer. One is giving behavioral feedback, because this is actually, I told you in the beginning, there is, of course, a way that digitalization can have an enablement effect, can help saving energy. And one of these is by putting a mirror in front of us, showing us the effect of our actions, and use this so-called behavioral feedback for hopefully resource conservation. And I will present you an example done in the domain of water heating, because space and water heating together are the two main sources of domestic energy consumption in the European Union. Together they amount for 80%, right? So much more than all the other appliances, dishwashing, internet, fridge, whatever, your kettle at home and so on. Transport excluded. And there is this nice gadget that former colleagues of mine from DTH developed and then used in this study. It's been plugged before the shower head, and it measures and can also show on this display the water volume, the energy consumption, not shown here, but it can also alternatively to the amount of water show the energy consumption, the temperature of the water, the energy efficiency, and it also has this polar bear animation. The longer and hotter you shower, so the more energy you consume in your shower, the more this ice cap here melts, and in the end it disappears and the poor bear drowns. And it's quite a smart device because it has no battery. It harvests the energy through a turbine from the water flow. So it is activated automatically, and it can not only measure these things, but also transmit via Bluetooth all that it has measured. And because it has a capacitor up to 3 minutes after the shower finishes. And then they have outfitted almost 700 households with these devices. And they made the study to see what happens when people see and have this feedback, right? And for that, they use a randomized controlled trial, of course. So there was a baseline phase and an intervention phase. In the treatment group that had 460 households, they, after the first 10 showers, which was just to establish the baseline, and that in which they would only see the temperature, these households will start seeing the entire information that I just talked about, whilst the control group would keep seeing the temperature. Why the control group also had this device? This is important to control for the Hawthorne effect. The Hawthorne effect is that people change their behavior when they know that they are being watched as part of the study. So the baseline should not be someone without a device, but someone with a device knowing they are in the study, right? So that's the correct baseline. And there was some surveys before and afterwards. And this is how it played out. During the baseline phase, the control group used 2.6 kilowatt hours of energy per shower on average. So for the first 10 showers, and then over the course of the next 2 months, it slightly grew because this was from August to October. So the cold water coming in was a bit colder, so more energy was needed to heat it up, right? And the study group had the same behavior during the baseline phase. But then as soon as the treatment started, they reduced with over 20% their energy, and this stayed constant, well, with the same slight growth because of the colder water over the course of the experiment. And of course, here again, there was no or barely rebound effect because they save very little money. I mean, as you all know, the electricity or gas we pay for hot water is unfortunately, from a sustainability perspective, a very low cost for all of us. So again, no mechanism for the rebound effect here. And finally, the last example, a conference that Lawrence Hilty, that I think you already met on Monday, and me did in 2009 when we organized a conference at 2 sites in the globe simultaneously, in Davos, Switzerland, and Nagoya, Japan. And the idea was that we knew that the intercontinental travel is the main responsible for the footprint of a conference. It's usually more than 90, sometimes way more than 90%, because people fly from all across the world to the conference site. And instead of this, we said, why shouldn't we have several sites across the globe, and replace those long intercontinental flights with shorter intracontinental ones. And of course, three sites across the globe is a bit hard to do because then for someone it will be always in the middle of the night, either America or Europe or Japan. But only with Europe and Japan we could do it in their afternoon and our morning. And this is how it looked. This Dennis Meadows speaking in Davos. This was 2009, right? So 11 years before the pandemics and before we all started using Zoom. It was a very similar concept already with full HD cameras and projectors, which was very hot back in the day. And we would send the speaker and also what the speaker presents to, right? So that the remote audience can also see what the speaker shows on the screen and just the slides. But more than this, we would present also in real life size the remote audience to create this sense of togetherness across the 2 sites. And the speakers would address then both audiences, allowing for really very natural interaction, including nonverbal cues and also cross-continental Q&A sessions. So it was quite a success, actually. And we also had this informal communication during breaks, which were quite successful as well. Their only problem was that, as we found out, sushi doesn't work well over IP, and also not beer, because in Japan, it was when we had this large break. For them, it was already 7 p.m. So for them, it was like the after conference social gathering. And for us, it was noon. So they're having beers and sushi, and we're stuck with sausages and coffee. But on a more serious note, what we found out by looking at the footprint of the conference, this here is this rectangle down here is the experiment as we did it. This is the number of participants and the average CO2 travel per participant, CO2 emissions for the travel of participants to the conference. And this was relatively low at a bit above 200 kilograms CO2 per participant due to the short journeys, right? And then we also asked participants so we had 531 attendees, and multiplying this with the 200 kilograms, we are 120 tons CO2 for the travel. But we also asked participants, hey, the ones in Davos, had it been only in Nagoya, would you have flown there? And vice versa, the ones in Nagoya, would you have flown to Davos? And deploying this questionable agreed methodology, we found out that in Davos, we would have a smaller conference and yet almost double the GHGs. And in Nagoya, a much smaller conference, because it was small. In Nagoya, we had anyway half of the participants in Davos, right? So we would have had those and a couple that would have flown from Davos, but much more, like even here, 50% more greenhouse gases, despite the very low number of participants. Or to put it the other way around, what these red arrows show, as compared to a traditional conference, either in Davos or in Nagoya, we had, of course, and I'm sure you know it already, a rebound in the number of participants. It was easier, transaction costs were reduced. It was easier to participate in a, on average, closer conference to you. So more people came, but yet, so we had a rebound. But because we saved some intercontinental flights, although more, intracontinental journeys came in, we didn't get to a backfire. The rebound in terms of energy was relatively modest. So we substantially reduced the total travel energy despite a large rebound in the number of participants. Okay, so I come with this to the last point of my talk. There are examples where the rebound is moderate, but even then, it is very important to be aware of it, because ignoring or even understating it can lead to massive overstatements of the positive effects. And this is what happened in those examples I presented in the beginning. And I want to qualitatively explain or show how this happens. And because of this, I'm taking one simple example. In a pre-digital world, right? We have some activity, say travel, and the energy per activity. And we have this many travel instances, and per travel instance, this is the energy. So the total energy will obviously be this square here. And now comes this digital technology that optimizes that in some way, either makes it more efficient, or as in this example, substitutes it entirely through, say, video conference, right? And it will substitute a part of those former activities. So these are not substituted, left of here on the left, and on the right, it's the substituted ones. Here we have an unchanged energy, obviously, because flying or traveling takes the same amount of energy. But here, the digital substitute is, of course, so much more efficient. So this is only down here, right? So this is the energy consumption we avoid, or the energy we save in total, right? But we have rebound effects. And so, because it's so much easier to do video conferences, we do more of them than travel. So these are the rebound activities, and this is their energy. So the total energy is this, but this is still positive, because if you subtract, this light green from the dashed here, it's still positive. So despite rebound, it's still a positive, balance for this substitution, and this is good. But the problem comes in the assessment. These are all ICT activities, because we don't see that alternative world. That's a hypothetical world. What would have happened if there was no video conferencing? What we see is this. We have this amount of travel, right? This here and this energy for it, and this amount of conferences and this energy for it. And we need to make an assumption about the hypothetical alternative world. And what often happens is a very generous assumption is being made. A lot in this alternative world, a lot of travel would have happened, so this is our assumption. And that's why we compute this as being the voided energy consumption, which is an overstatement, because if we had godlike knowledge, and no one has, that's the ontological uncertainty here. It's a very tough problem to deal with. And I don't have an answer how to do it, by the way. But if we had this sort of superior being knowledge, then we'll know that these were actually substituted, and then this is the overstated baseline, and that's the overstated avoided energy consumption, and that's how you get into the megatons and the gigatons and so on. So to summarize this up, the digitalization acts as a lubricant for societies and economies. It induces efficiency, it reduces transaction costs, saves time, accelerates the entire national and global economies, fosters globalization. We didn't talk about that, but it's obvious it does. So it eliminates friction, but friction is good from a sustainability perspective usually, because when you lose friction, things move more, and more happens and more consumption is generated. So there are, and I have shown a couple of example services with little or no rebound. And the question is, so two questions I have for you is, can the features of such activities be somehow conceptualized and such services, fostered? And how can they be fostered? And how shall we deal with the others that have inherently a rebound effect? Shall there be a fiscal policy? Should there be regulations? Like there are no, empty runs allowed for autonomous vehicles, but then again, with exceptions, if it's an empty run to pick someone old or someone who has a physical impairment, then it is again allowed and so on. So I would be, I mean, we can, of course, and I hope we will have a lively discussion, but I would like to hear your opinions on these 2 points as well. And by this, I want to finish by saying that, this relation between digitalization and sustainability in general, or energy in particular, is very complex, and we need to promote the good, fight the evil, and manage somehow the complexity, because we are running out of time. So we shouldn't keep chasing the wrong culprits, which would be, in my opinion, the direct footprint of ICT, or advocating for, it's a silver bullet, it will save the planet. No, we should really try and really understand all the impacts and how can we foster the good ones and, counter the bad ones. And by this, I thank you very much. And I'm looking forward to the discussions on Tuesday. Bye.